College football is back. Week 0 action has just concluded. Abe Gordon, Garrett Chapman here to react to all of it. It was so much fun. I am so excited. It's the worst offseason in all of sports. The college football offseason is finally over. Georgia Tech stuns Florida State. What an incredible way to start the college football season. Plus, SMU survives a scare from Nevada. We got people staying up way after dark to watch Hawaii play football. It is what us sickos live for. Abe Gordon, Garrett Chapman here to react to all of it live on the College Football Overtime podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. If you are joining us on the podcast after the fact, make sure to like, make sure to subscribe. If you're on YouTube, same thing. Make sure to like, make sure to subscribe, drop a comment. Let us know what you want us to talk about next week as we have college football to dig into. Oh, I love it, Abe. How you feeling, buddy?
I'm sorry. Do we have actually games to react to? I mean, come on, dude. For as much scruff as people kind of gave it on the front end, there's only 4 games, only one of them's watchable, all this nonsense. Like week 1 delivered, man, like in a big way, like from the start, the afternoon game, the evening game, and then Hawaii late. And like week 0, I mean, I may call it week 1. Sorry. Week 0, like really delivered, like a little bit more than I expected it to. I thought maybe I'd just be juiced up for Georgia Tech, but no, man, it was the whole day. And that's obviously just whetting the appetite for what we have pretty much every Saturday moving forward.
Yeah, it was just a tremendous day of college football action, and people used to talk about the college football season is week 0 not really being anything worth noting. And, when it's Navy and Notre Dame playing, and I think they won that game last year in Dublin, Ireland, 41-3 or something crazy like that. Kind of a snoozer. But when you get a top 10 team over in Ireland, when you get a crazy upset, when you have a couple Power 5 teams or Power 4 teams playing, it makes for some compelling content. So I really like the idea. I like week 0. It's another year where college football comes to us a week early. And then coming up on Saturday, we're going to have tons more college football to get into. So we'll talk about that on Wednesday when we preview all of those games, getting into all of that action. But Abe, we got college football to react to. And the biggest one, of course, is right here. Georgia Tech, the rambling wreck of Georgia Tech. They upset Florida State in Dublin, 24-21. Burr hits a 44-yard field goal as time expires for the first top 10 victory for Brent Keys and the Yellow Jackets since 2015. Ironically, against this same Florida State team. That game also ended in a field goal as time expired, except that one was one of the wildest finishes to a football game that I have ever seen. I can't speak for you, but as a blocked field goal that goes back for a touchdown against a guy who, actually the guy who returned it, the Austin twins. I played both of them in a state championship football game just a couple years before that. And that was kind of a wild thing, kind of a nugget to throw in there. But look, at the end of the day, Georgia Tech, just an incredible performance there. The defense shines in this one. They hold Florida State to 291 yards of total offense, which is the lowest of any Mike Norvell team going back to 2021. It's been a good long while. DJ Uiagalelei struggles mightily in this game, only has 196 yards passing. And this is a defense, really, for Georgia Tech that struggled in a big way last year. They revamped this group. Tyler Santucci bringing in 7 new starters. Not a lot was expected out of them. I thought that this was going to be a team that relied completely and totally on strong offensive play, but it was the defense that won the day, holding Florida State under 100 yards rushing, 58 yards on the first drive, 40 after that. Honestly, Georgia Tech was the better team throughout the course of this game, and it showed in the final scoreline.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is going to be a harsh criticism and compliments for Georgia Tech as well, because you're dealing with a 1-game sample size, and we try and make all these gross statements based on that. I told you I didn't buy Florida State as a top 10 team. I had very real questions about not just the amount of talent they lost, but very specifically the quarterback, and that deemed to be a real issue for the Seminoles. Look, I get that he completed 18, 19 passes out of the 27 he threw, but way too many of them were within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage. I mean, way too much short stuff.
13. 13
yeah.
of his 19 were within 5 yards.
Yeah, and that allows Georgia Tech to crowd the box because they're not worried about getting beat over the top. It allows them to go with a couple of run blitzes that certainly helped. And for a Florida State team that you and I sat here talking about this game, and we said, Florida State's going to run the ball. They're going to have to run the ball. That's going to be their offense. And, oh, wouldn't you know, Georgia Tech's one of the worst run-stopping defenses in all of college football. Now, that's a year ago. You mentioned you make some changes and you move some things around and you adjust. But we're not talking about, I mean, this goes well beyond just one of the worst run stoppings. I mean, to hold Roydale Williams and company to under 100 yards, to me, this is more about what Florida State's unable to do necessarily than what Georgia Tech is able to do. Now, Garrett, that being said, you and I are located in Atlanta. You cover Georgia Tech. We work for a radio station that talks about Georgia Tech. Not that many of us were surprised. And I know you wrote shocks Florida State down there. We talked about it being an upset. I don't care what the Vegas line is. Like we knew they were wrong for a long time. And there's a reason that line moved in a certain direction. This is a very good win for Georgia Tech. I'm not taking away from that. I don't think we're that surprised, though. And quite honestly, I don't even think this is the best Georgia Tech that can appear. I don't think their offense was in gear quite enough. I don't think they did overly a great job of getting the ball in the hands of some of their playmakers, and they were still able to beat Florida State. This is not the best Tech team that we're going to see over the course of the season. The one question I do have, though, is we've seen Georgia Tech reach this level, and I've talked to you about this. We've seen them play. We've seen them knock off teams. We've seen them go on the road as double-digit dogs and handle business, especially recently under Brent Key. Here's the thing. Can you do it week in, week out? Can you bring it 100%. Consistently? Because if you can do that, now we're talking about a top 25 team. Now we're talking about a team that's no doubt going to a bowl game. Now we're talking about a team that is in that second tier in the ACC trying to get to the first tier. And, oh, by the way, you just got your first 5-star in a decade and a half, and you start to see how you build this thing. But you've got to put that product on the field every single week. You can't just rise up against Florida State, sleepwalk to a 3-point win over Georgia State here in week one, and lose to, Syracuse, whoever it may be. You got to bring it every single week. That's now what Brent Key is tasked with. But, man, what a proud and glorious season opening win for Georgia Tech. So many questions about, how much of last year was maybe a fluke, some of the games that they were able to win. We didn't think so. And we thought this team is building the right way and could be better with Haynes King stepping in and being very sturdy, with Jamal Haynes finding some big holes as well. Look, I can criticize Florida State a little bit more if you want, but I want to give you an opportunity to congratulate Georgia Tech covering them as you do, because that was an outstanding performance across the pond in Ireland.
Yeah, I mean, and look, at the end of the day, if you talk about a team going and completing an upset, you need a couple of things to go your way. You got to play some good defense. You need the ball to bounce your way a couple of times, and it did. On offense, when the ball bounced right back into the arms of Georgia Tech players on 2 mishandled snaps at times from Haynes King, and the ball bounced your way, no harm, no foul when it was all said and done. But on top of that, you have suffocating run defense. You keep your guys on the field and their guys off of the field. You had two drives specifically from Georgia Tech that effectively went for about 15 minutes of game action, which is perfect. If you are a Brent Key coach team, which he played offensive line at Georgia Tech, he's coached offensive line. That's how he cuts his teeth. They ran the ball at will. You talk about how good that rush defense was for Georgia Tech. They held a really good Florida State team to under 100 yards rushing. They also ran for 200 yards themselves. Yeah. They were a force in this game, and they did it with just bruising consistency. But that's the number one thing, is consistency. And you alluded to that with your statements just a moment ago. This team was not consistent last year. They're 5-0 against ranked ACC opponents. 5-0. And They also had losses to Boston College where they gave up 21 unanswered points in the fourth quarter to blow the game. They couldn't get off the field against Bowling Green last year. They blow that game. In a game that they were run off of the field
Yeah.
at home. And then they turn around, they go on the road and beat Miami. They go beat UNC on Halloween at home. They take Georgia to the wire at home. And they just didn't do it on a consistent basis. But that has been really a theme over the course of this offseason, following the team and covering them throughout the offseason. Consistency and attacking things on a daily basis. That's something that Brent Key has been trying to instill into this program. And based off of what we saw on Saturday, it looks like they're starting to buy into that process. They're buying into what Brent Key is selling. But you mentioned it. It doesn't mean anything if you don't show up on Saturday and treat that game like it's the only game that matters, because it is. College football is a weird sport. You say we can make too many big overreactions after a week 0 performance or just 1 week. You only get 12 opportunities. That's it. That's damn near 10% of your season just finished up on Saturday. And you got another 10% coming up here next Saturday. Every game matters in this sport. And Georgia Tech won the day, and they did it in a way that all underdogs would be proud of.
I want to spotlight two specific moments here, Garrett, that I think really stand to tell you what Georgia Tech is all about. The first drive defensively for Georgia Tech, Florida State walks right through them. Huge holes all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
They march right down the field and get that stupid 2-point conversion, and that's where it is. And for a quick second, you start to think, oh, boy, this is a real problem. This is not going to go well. But they answer immediately and defiantly, definitively. They answer on offense. I think getting that touchdown on your first offensive drive, doing it with a couple of significant chunk plays, sends us that statement that we're here to play as well. So kudos in the response immediately at the start of the game. And then also at the end of the game, where you're setting yourself up for a game-winning field goal and you have a big mistake that costs you yardage that you have to get back. And I'm talking about the fumbled snap with the jet sweep motion, and you lose whatever it was, 7-8 yards. And I'm not saying he would have never made that field goal, but it becomes increasingly difficult. But you respond to Eric Singleton, a guy who was pretty quiet in this game, if we're going to be honest, a guy that's going to need to have his name called a lot more over the course of the season for this offense to hit its stride and to peak. But in a special moment where Haynes King needed to get yardage back and you needed to have a play, Singleton was the guy that came open. You got some key yardage back to put your guy back into a little bit more comfortable position where he nails a 44-yard kick. I think you look at those two moments individually and say that's what this Georgia Tech thing is all about. That's what Brent Key is all about. We got hit in the face immediately, and we responded. We got hit in the face when we thought it was going well for us at the end, and we responded. I think that is going to be a theme for this Georgia Tech team, not just this season, but really throughout the timeline for Brent Key. I'm excited to see that develop over the course of this team, but a squad that can take that first punch, can take that last punch, and still come out swinging. Very impressed by the response both times.
Yeah, and Kyle Eifert actually talked about that after the game. He said how Santucci and this defensive staff put a massive emphasis on that over the course of the offseason. That and tackling, which Amari Harvey also talked about after the game, the defensive back who came up on several key stops. Look, it's how do you respond when teams come out and punch you in the mouth? He said, Eifert said basically after the game, last year's team would have turned around and started blaming each other and pointing fingers and saying, well, what's going on? Like everything's falling apart and panicking. And that's what losing teams do. And that's why they lost a lot of the games that they did. Good teams don't do that kind of thing. And Kyle Eifert said, no uncertain terms, that they basically sat down and said, hey, we looked over everything, said, these are a few small corrections that we can make. Let's go out and ball. That's what they did. And they shut down a pretty prolific Florida State offense, or an offense that appears as an offense that could go out and be a prolific team. in 2024. Georgia Tech was just the better football team. That's really what it is. And it's mental fortitude. It's confidence. It's believing in your team and believing in your staff. And that's something that we really haven't seen from that team in some time, at least not at that level. And the defense looks like it's got some depth. The offense is very good. And I think I took some heat from some people on Twitter for my very positive comments about how good the Georgia Tech offense can be in 2024. I said it could be one of the very best in the country, and I believe that. I really do believe that it could be one of the very best in 2024 because you have a Haynes King, because you have a 1,000-yard rusher, because you have an offensive line that did what it just did to a dynamic and dominant Florida State front seven. You have a wide receiver core led by Eric Singleton, like you mentioned, and Malik Rutherford, and there's talent on this team. There's plenty of talent on this team. And I think they got an offensive line to really get it done and a mentality that's instilled by Brent Key that they earned this game. They were the better football team, and it showed on Saturday. I think it was just a tremendous game for the Yellow Jackets, a season-defining win, even though that the regular season really is only just getting started. We got week 1 action coming up, and look, it's going to be another full season of everything. Do you have something else you want to say real quick?
Yeah, I want to flip this around, Garrett. We spent most of this discussion on Georgia.
Sure.
I want to talk about Florida State and where they're going from here, because this is a team that needs to run the ball and was unable to run the ball. And with Roydell Williams, and I don't know what the answer is if DJU is going to be able to complete passes down the field. They obviously lose a couple of guys in terms of Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson. They didn't have someone else step up on Saturday. And I don't know who their receiver's going to be. But Roydell Williams, I mean, 38 yards is pathetic. Especially considering what they accomplished on their opening drive. I mean, what were the numbers beyond that? And I know we talked about Florida State, and I didn't buy them as a top 10 team. It might go well beyond that with the amount of questions that they have to answer. I'd be very concerned if I were a Seminole fan about what I saw. Look, they have some time. They should be the better team when they face Boston College in their next game. I said should be,
They should
but
be.
They need to get a lot more out of DJU and out of the run game. The defense, I think, from Florida State, I think did a respectable job because I'm with you. I think Georgia Tech saw maybe not quite as high on them, but I think Georgia's offense is going to keep them in pretty much every game this year. I do agree with you on that. And so I think the defense did an okay job. The Georgia Tech offensive line, very experienced and took care of business. So the D line needs to get a little bit better as well. But to me, this offense from Florida State was a complete letdown. And they're going to have to figure that out. They're really going to have to figure that out to accomplish anywhere close to what the goals were as of Friday morning. Because right now, the way you lost this game and with the rest of your schedule currently, until proven otherwise, playoffs are off the table.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing is DJ Uyunglele didn't lose them that game. I know he took a lot of heat on Twitter, and most of it I'd say was pretty unfounded. I mean, saying that, blaming him for the loss, doing everything else there. I don't lay this at his feet. It's the fact that your defense couldn't stay on the field. They allowed 200 plus yards rushing. And your rushing attack was putrid. And that's all there is to it. I mean, Georgia Tech was able to pin their ears back and get after you. I'd like
some
to
of that is on him though. Like
he
some
needs
of
to
that
play
is
with
on,
more
like,
confidence. And
I think the rushing attack was held to 98 yards because Georgia Tech was able to adjust their defense without any threat of being beat over the top. And part of that's on offensive playmakers on the outside, in which there are questions. Part of that's on DJU as well, though.
Of course. I mean, everybody shoulders some of this blame, but I'm referencing specifically the fact that a lot of people say it's they lay it almost all at his feet. And he was kind of the poster child for the disappointing day for Florida State. And I mean, there was a lack of a downfield passing attack, and it cost them in this game, and absolutely it did. But he also still had he was the only consistent thing about this team. And that doesn't spell good things for Florida State in 2024.
Yeah, I mean we've heard that with quarterbacks anyways, just too much credit when you
Yeah.
win, too much blame when you lose, and this is certainly an example of that.
It's what you sign up for.
Yeah.
It's really kind of just the name of the game. But huge credit to Georgia Tech on a fantastic one. SMU, they survived.
I mean,
It was a little
I mean,
nerve-wracking there for Rhett Lashley and company. It didn't seem like it was going to come, but 16 points in the fourth quarter, and that's all she wrote for the Mustangs, the new addition to the ACC. They start the season 1-0, but Nevada is, I think, the story in this game. New head coach joining this program. I mean, he did a really good job. He helped lead Texas to a college football playoff berth. He helped bring Montana State to high ranks back in the FCS ranks. They led them to I think an FCS semifinal game the year before last. And I mean, this is a team that has really struggled over the last couple of years and instantly are a better team. And that's how important coaching is. And it's really clear. But honestly, SMU, the way that they were able to put the team on their back right there at the end of this game, trailing very late in this one. And then they travel all the way down the field and get that go-ahead touchdown on a beautiful play, a gorgeous play from quarterback. I'm really impressed with what I saw, the resolve of SMU to show up and get this done. It's not pretty, but it doesn't matter if you win pretty because you certainly can't lose pretty.
well, look, not all wins are made equal, and this is just about the fact that you did get the win. But here's the question: how do you learn from it? How do you grow from it? Right? I
Mhm.
mean, it's early in the season. I think you can write it off as for a variety of different reasons. But I'll be honest, very disappointed we didn't see a more dominant SMU team. SMU gives me a lot of vibes of last year Georgia Tech. They're a team that can be pesky. They're a team that can get some of these ranked opponents on the right night. We saw Georgia Tech do that quite a few times last year. That's how SMU kind of feels to me this year. Preston Stone, like Haynes King a year ago, not a ton is known about him, but he's going to be one of the better quarterbacks in the ACC. And then you and I were talking as we were watching this game last night. The tight end RJ Maryland with a buck
Oh, yeah.
60 in that late touchdown. Seems like a
Just in the
big
second half,
playmaker.
by the way.
Yeah, seems like a big playmaker for them. Look, the key part of this is that you do stay undefeated and you got your whole season ahead of you. A little disappointing in the performance, but what can you learn from this? What can you grow out of this? But I'm still gonna be interested. I'm not closing the book on SMU being a problem in the ACC. I just want to say I never thought they were going to compete in the ACC. I thought they can be a pest, and so I'm not writing them out on that. I'll tell you what I did learn from this game is to keep an eye, especially if you play college fantasy football. I want to keep an eye on this Nevada quarterback, Brendan Lewis. He had 2 passing touchdowns, threw for a buck 30. Also led the team with 77 rushing yards. So you know how it is when they get into those conference games against a couple of weaker opponents than SMU. You could see a couple 4 or 5 touchdown performances there from him. So going to keep an eye out on that. But ultimately, I think lessons learned and you survived, as you wrote down there. You survived, and that's the right way to write this thing up because they were in trouble all game long. But it's going to take a lot more. It's going to take a lot more to get things done in the ACC, and I think that is something they'll take away from it. But you mentioned it. You walk away with a 0 still in that loss column. That's the end of the story right there.
Good teams find a way.
Yeah.
And like that's just what you have to do. You're down. You have 10 minutes left in this game. You're down 24-13. It doesn't matter who you are. You could be a Georgia. You can be Ohio State. It doesn't matter. Great teams find ways to win football games. You've seen even the best teams struggle on a week-to-week basis because that's just college football. That's just how this sport kind of goes. And I mean, you give yourself a chance to win. Preston Stone delivers a strong second half. We already talked about Maryland coming back and doing what he did in this game. And I mean, you step up and make plays. You make plays. And that means Anthony Booker tackling Brendan Lewis in the end zone to force a safety, to give the team an opportunity, starting a drive on the 17-yard line and going going the length of the field to score a touchdown to go ahead in this game. Those are game-winning plays. And It's giving your team an opportunity to get the job done. And I don't want to heap too much criticism or praise, just like I didn't want to heap too much criticism or praise about Georgia Tech and Florida State, because it is week 0. It's a 1-week sample size. It's hard to really say this is what this team is going to be. I mean,
Right.
hell, Ollie Gordon had 20 carries in the first 3 games for Oklahoma State last year, and he was a Heisman finalist. I mean, he was the best running back in college football last year. That was a team that started 1-3. Oklahoma State did, and they go and played in a Big 12 championship game. Crazy things happen on a week-to-week basis in college football. But like you mentioned, the number one thing is that SMU has a 0 in the loss column. And that's all that matters, is survive in advance, get on through and get into the next week, because you give yourself an opportunity to play in the college football playoff and potentially win a national championship. And I'm not saying that SMU is one of those teams. I don't think necessarily. I think that they could be a pest in the ACC, just like you do. But as long as they continue to find ways to win football games, they'll do just that. Anything else from you, Abe, on this one or week 0?
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. I'm a little frustrated at something. And you and I were working together late Saturday night. After the
Way into the
SM,
night.
yeah, after SMU had ended. Um, the Hawaii game not being like televised nationally. Like, what are we doing?
Travesty.
Like, no offense to CBS Sports Network, who aired the SMU Nevada game. Like, find a way to put it on. Like, you're definitely going to get more people watching football at 12:30 or 1 a.m., 2 a.m. than whatever show was airing at that time. And quite frankly, same thing for ESPN, man. Like, finish up that UFC fight night and throw Hawaii on there. Like, that's a game that's got to be on, man. Like, I remember growing up, and I'm sure you do too. Like, if nothing else, Hawaii kicked off at 11:59 p.m. And that gave you something to watch deep into the night. And it should have been on. Like, it is what it is. A little frustrating. I don't know when you have the opportunity of 4 games, how in its own window, and I get it's a late window, it's not on.
Yeah.
Needed to be televised, man. I'm sorry. Just spitting facts.
It's like Pac-12 after dark. You always knew you were in for a treat.
Yeah.
And they missed an opportunity in that one. And I think a lot of people downloaded the app and then had to change IP addresses and sell a kidney to go watch the game. But they got it done, and they watched the game. And look, at the end of the day, college football's back. Week 0 is under wraps. Week 1 is just a couple of days away. And we did it, folks. We survived.
We made it.
Now we get college football action every single weekend.
Oh, we're going to ram it down your throats. You can bet on that.
January, and it's going to be a lot of fun. It'll be just like Georgia Tech running it down the throats of Florida State every single play, every single week. So make sure you keep it right here on the College Football Overtime Podcast. Garrett Chapman, Abe Gordon with you all season long. We'll try to get you 2 podcast episodes every single week. So make sure to like, make sure to subscribe, make sure to follow along. Thank you so much for listening, and we cannot wait to see you on Wednesday when we break down all of these week 1 action matchups, great games. We're very excited. Thanks so much for listening. We will see you again very soon. Thanks.